think one of the reasons why it's hard to translate emotion is because emotion is there to be felt, it's not there to be heard a lot of the time. I think we're really quick nowadays to just assess a situation just based on what we can see without understanding there is a whole backstory that bent forward to pick up the keys. And I literally just soiled myself on my doorstep. You're putting your own agenda onto how they're supposed to be feeling. It really does ease that in your mind. I think as humans, we tend to overthink. We tend to really amplify a situation and make it 10 times worse than what it is. It's more like when someone else can accept what you're telling them, you sort of find a comfort and an acceptance within that. It's not always about trying to be a hero in everybody's book. Sometimes it's just about allowing someone else to see the hero within them. And hey everybody, hope you're well. So today's actually part 2 of my last video where I outlined my illness, sort of the process behind what happened and giving you the details as to sort of what I went through within that time. So this video is going to be a little bit more different. So I've explained obviously how I got the illness, what happened from that, but now is basically going to be describing and explaining and more just talking about the repercussions of that. So more the mental health side of things, you know, more sort of the withdrawal side, what I was kind of left with, and sort of the emotional side of things, because I feel like that's maybe a little bit more of a taboo topic. A lot of people don't really want to share that, so I felt like maybe I could actually give you a part 1 into sort of what my illness is, and now a part 2 as to living with it and handling it and the emotions behind it. And you know, before I move on, I just want to say a really huge thank you. I mean, the responses were overwhelming. I was absolutely glued to my phone for days because, you know, I wanted to give everyone the individual attention and speak to everybody about their own personal journeys and their own personal stories. And you know, it really did mean a lot to me how many people who I didn't know I was able to connect with and speak to, and you know, just the love and just the sheer amount of gratefulness that I am able to sort of make these videos and share this journey with you lot. It was a lot from me, so to receive the responses that I did, I'm ever so grateful. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first thing I actually want to talk about is mental health itself. So I think there are so many taboos within mental health. I feel like, especially within a younger generation, I feel as though it's not taken seriously or considered, you know, a real thing. I feel like a lot of people think that, you know, by saying, oh, we was poor when we was younger, or oh, we was this, you know, you don't really know what it's like to go through something. I think, you know, a lot of it is invalidated with a lot of, especially a lot of the older generation. I think that, you know, I don't want to blame a complete generation for it, but I feel as though sort of when you move up a generation, that there is this really lack of understanding between the different generations. I feel like the mindset and the way they were sort of raised was to just be warriors and soldiers, and again, that's great, but again, there are a lot of repercussions within the older generation as well because of this. And you know, I think that it's very hard trying to translate emotion, and I think one of the reasons why it's hard to translate emotion is because emotion is there to be felt, it's not there to be heard a lot of the time. And I think when you're trying to explain yourself, it's really hard to like articulate emotion. It's very hard to sometimes cross that barrier of being able to explain how you're feeling, and I think I actually had that firsthand. One of the things that me and Cameron have been like really struggling with recently is things playing on my mind, and I sort of just explode, and I'm just a little bit like, I've been thinking about this for a whole week, and you know, you haven't helped me on this, that, and he'll just be like, babe, like calm down, like let's talk about it. Like, how am I meant to know this is on your mind if we're not talking about it? So literally yesterday, like that, we had one of those situations where we went on a walk and I sort of spoke about how I was feeling, because you know, it's not easy. I don't want to sit here and pretend I live this, you know, rosemary life. I think that I love being very transparent with you guys, and for me, I've expressed this quite a lot. One of my biggest weaknesses is looking weak, and I hate that. So I think for me, throughout this whole process, you know, when you're trying to bottle things up and you're trying to keep things in for the sake of not looking weak, I think you know, you do a lot more damage in the long run. So I sort of want to talk to you guys about where my mental health started to deteriorate and sort of the repercussions of that. So once I was diagnosed with my illness, it wasn't really immediately, because I spoke about it a little bit in the video, but I said whilst I wasn't actually in hospital going through those processes, there was just so much going on that, you know, although I had my down days and I had certain things like that, the dust hadn't really settled on what I had been going through. And I think once I had gone through it and then everything just disappeared around me, I didn't kind of have that fuss around me or people or all that sort of stuff. I think I then started to sort of digest really how I was feeling. And you know, I hit hit a really, well, I hit a lot of dark places, but I think overall it started to become really difficult. And one of the reasons why it became difficult was, like I said previously, I couldn't articulate my emotions. And I think part of me didn't want to. I think sometimes, you know, I have this thing with my friend where it's like when you say it out loud, it becomes real. And I think a lot of that was that. I think, you know, saying something out loud, it really does solidify what you're saying. And I think if I said it, it's like I just didn't want to believe it. Again, I think that's another reason why I let my emotions build up. But I'll sort of get into where it all started. So when I came out of hospital, I was really ill, and you know, I was really sick, and again, that in itself I think was a big heartbreak. And I think because it affected me physically, I think that was one of the hardest things to get over, looking in the mirror and not recognizing yourself. You know, I think I was quite, I don't like to use the word vain, but I think that's probably what it was. I was quite a vain girl, and you know, I liked the way I looked, and I liked the way I dressed, and I liked my fancy dinners, and I liked all of that sort of stuff. And you know, I think when that sort of hit me, I just wasn't that person anymore. I was so paranoid that people could recognize me and see me and laugh at me, to the point where I was worried people were taking pictures of me, like friends and stuff, or friends of friends, and I was worried that, you know, there were just pictures going around. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't really want to be around anyone. And you know, I think it has a really big impact on your mental health. I think naturally I started to suffer with a lot of withdrawal symptoms from that. So I didn't want to go out, I didn't want to see people, I didn't want to be in a situation where people would look at me and be like, is that Farah? Wow, she looks really big, or why does she look like that? And you know, it did happen. There were times where I did go out, and unfortunately that did happen. You know, I had a lot of people say to me, oh Farah, you've gotten a bit fat. Oh Farah, you don't look the same. A lot of people didn't know what I was going through because I was very private about when I was going through it. So you know, naturally people just thought I put on weight and I looked quite big and all of this sort of stuff. And I think that's sort of where it came from. When someone says to you, you're looking a bit fat, I myself, probably before I got sick, I might have said the exact same thing. Or you know what, I might have said it to someone else, you know. So I think it's really taught me how to be aware of my tone and my language when I'm discussing things now. Like, you know, when someone says to me, oh, this person's really big, I'm like, but they could have diabetes, but they could have an eating disorder. Like, you just don't know what's going on with people. They might have lost someone, and you know, they've resorted to eating more food as a sort of comfort. And I think these are the sort of excuses we as a young generation really lack on making those excuses for other people. And again, my naivety and my ignorance was also put me in that position in my life. And I think until I've gone through something, maybe this is why it's taught me at my age what I know now that I didn't necessarily know then. And you know, this is all a part of growing, and this is all a part of life. And you know, when I was flipping 13, I'm not the same person I am now, and this is just, you know, how we sort of grow and evolve as human beings. But you know, if there's one thing I want to put out into this video today, it's to really understand different perspective of people's living situations. I think we're really quick nowadays to just assess a situation just based on what we can see, without understanding there is a whole backstory, there is a whole life behind what we're looking at. And I think I just want people to understand that mental health really can affect you physically, emotionally, mentally. There are so many different aspects to it. And you know, although mental illness can be a genetic disorder, I think a lot of, in our younger generation, without being stereotypical, I think it comes from a lot of trauma and our environmental factors. Again, that is specific to me. So obviously what I went through was a lot of trauma, which had sort of created a situation for me which I necessarily would never have been in. And I sort of want to talk to you guys where it really got bad. So one of the symptoms of ulcerative colitis is the urgency to go to the toilet, and you know, that urgency didn't go away. And like I said, the urgency could happen to me 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times in a day, and it could happen anywhere. I think a lot of it was psychological. So when I would see a toilet or I'd be close to home, I would get this, the urge would come on a lot stronger. And you know, there'd actually be times where, honest to God, I'd be coming up to my house and I wouldn't actually look at my house. I'd just continue with like looking down, because I knew the moment that I see my house, it would be like a trigger for me to go to the toilet, and then I would really need to go to the toilet. That was something that, you know, I lived with day in, day out. And this is one of the reasons why I didn't want to leave my house, was because I was scared I was gonna soil myself in public. And unfortunately I've been in those situations, you know, I don't want to lie to anyone. One occasion that's really stuck with me till now, and it's not funny, so I don't know why I'm laughing. I laugh in really awkward situations, by the way, guys. I don't know if anyone knows this about, well, my friends do. I laugh in really awkward situations, and I tend to upset people a lot. I'm really sorry. But back to what I was saying. So I once was getting to my house and I had this really bad urge to go to the toilet. I remember I was out, and you know, I just remember feeling really anxious on the bus. I was coming home, and where I lived at the time, I had to go up 2 flights of stairs. So I remember walking in and walking up, and literally like I am clenching my butt cheeks together, like I'm not even gonna lie, like I'm walking up the stairs and I'm just like in agony from like stomach cramps and all of this stuff, and I'm walking upstairs, walking upstairs, and I remember like, and like I said, because I know I'm getting closer to a toilet, I know that obviously the urge is getting stronger and stronger. So I remember I got to the door and I just remember looking for my keys in my bag, and I didn't know anyone was in at the time, and if I did I would have just knocked or like called my mum to open the door. But I just remember looking for my keys in my bag, and as I picked out my keys from my bag, I tried to put it in the door and it dropped, like as I was putting it in the door, and I literally just took a breath. I remember I was like, and I looked down and I was just like, I need to pick up those keys. But I know if I try and pick up those keys, like I'm just gonna give way. But I had no choice. So I bent forward to pick up the keys, and I literally just soiled myself on my doorstep. And it's not funny. I don't honest to God, don't find it funny. But I just remember standing there, and I just let it happen. I felt like shit. And that really excused the pun, because I felt like shit and I was wearing shit at the same time. But literally, like, it looked like I had a nappy on, and I just stood there and I just did what I had to do, and I just calmly bent down to grab my, because I didn't actually grab the keys. As I bent down to grab the keys, it's when it happened. So I bent down again to grab the keys, and I just remember walking in my house, and I remember walking to the toilet and just obviously sorting myself out. And I remember my mum saying to me, hey, and she was like, did you fart? And I was like, yeah, I farted. And then I just walked into the toilet, and obviously like I just started cleaning myself and whatever and all that sort of stuff. And that, I think, was, although I can laugh about it now, I think at that moment in time it was so fucking sad, because it was just like, what? I'm 20, I think I was like 23, I can't even remember, 23, 24, and I'm like, why is this happening to me? I'm like, this should not be happening to me. Like, I felt kind of like an old person. I was like, this doesn't happen to young people, but it does happen to young people, unfortunately, and it happened to me. So this created, 1, heightened anxiety within my body, 2, withdrawal symptoms, 3, I would say, you know, signs of depression, just from obviously going through what I'm going through. There was a really big form of unacceptance within myself. There was a really big form of question mark. So again, there was a lot going on within me. And not only that, my illness is triggered by stress. So although it's not created or caused by stress, it is triggered by stress. So I could have a flare up due to me being really upset or angry or things like that. And so, you know, you're trying to stay calm and you're trying to relax, but at the same time it's really hard because you're bleeding out your bum and all this sort of stuff. And you know, it is really difficult to sort of come to terms with. And so I remember after that, you know, I still went out a few times, but you know, if I was going out and I was booking a restaurant, for example, I would ask them for the closest seat in the a restaurant that's closest to the toilet. If I'm going into a public space, I'm looking for my closest toilets. Like, my thought process was no longer the same. I was no longer thinking like a young, chilled girl. I was more thinking about, okay, you know what, if I'm in a situation where I really need to go to the toilet, can I get there? You know, what if somebody is in the toilet while I'm trying to go to the toilet? What if somebody stops me in the street and I start talking to somebody and I can't cut the conversation? How do I tell somebody that, you know, I need to go to the toilet? There's so many things that you need to think about. What if I go to a friend's house and one of their family members is in the toilet? How do I say, excuse me, I really need to go to the toilet, otherwise I'm going to shit myself in your house? Like, there's so many things to think about within this sort of topic, and this just stopped me from going out. So I just said to myself, do you know what, my safe place is home. I'm just going to stay at home. And this again has a lot of its own effects within itself, because when you start staying at home, you start overthinking, and you know, you start really living in your own brain, and you know, that's what really started to happen to me. So my thoughts started to really spiral out of control at this point. I just wanted a way out, and I just didn't feel like I had one. And you know, one of the amazing, most beautiful benefits, which I always talk about, is Cameron. I didn't actually tell Cameron what happened to me at the time. I told him a lot later after, when I felt like I sort of came to terms with it and accepted the situation that I was in. But I was really embarrassed in the beginning. I didn't really want to say to him, oh, you know, this happened to me today. So I would always sort of tell him the mental side of things, but I never really sort of discussed the physical side of things. If there's one piece of advice I can sort of give anyone, it would be to talk about how you're feeling. And I really do believe a problem shared is a problem halved, because you know what, when someone else comforts you and they make you feel better about a situation, although the situation is still there and you still think about it, it's more like when someone else can accept what you're telling them, you sort of find a comfort and an acceptance within that. And I think when I would tell Cameron something and he'd be like, oh, that's absolutely fine, babe, like, don't worry about it, of course we can look for the closest toilet, or of course we can do this, because they make it seem so normal, it makes it seem so normal for you, and you're a little bit like, well, you know what, I sat there overthinking that for the last half an hour, 1 hour. Whereas when they're like, yeah, cool, like, no worries, or, you know, when you're telling somebody, you know, we need to make a little bit of an adjustment, and they're like, yeah, sure, it really does ease that in your mind. I think as humans, we tend to overthink, we tend to really amplify a situation and make it 10 times worse than what it is. And when you just share that emotion, you just get such a different perspective, and when it's the right people around you, it will 100% make you feel better. So I definitely think that speaking to somebody and speaking about how you're feeling is, you know, a really big part of it. I think for me, because I was going through a physical side of it, so essentially, you know, shitting myself, I think it was really hard for someone to relieve that burden, because although it was mental, it was still physical as well. You know, it wasn't something that I had made in my head, it was something that was physically happened to me and then happening in my head, if that sort of makes sense. So it is a little bit different, because obviously once I went back into remission and, you know, I was only going to the toilets normally and everything sort of went back to normal, I didn't have that mental element of it. But I still definitely am left with after effects that will never ever go away. So just for example, if I have, without being really explicit, but being explicit, if I was to have diarrhea, I would get very nervous, my anxiety would go through the roof, because that's one of the symptoms that you are having a flare-up. So for me, you know, every toilet is not normal. You know, there have been times where I have literally taken my poo out of the toilet and analysed it on a piece of tissue. And I know it sounds so disgusting, but these are the things that, like, you start doing, because I need to check, do I have blood spots within my poo? Do I have mucus? You know, am I as a flare-up starting? Because again, no toilet will ever be normal for me again. And although, don't get me wrong, like, I go to the toilet however often and it's just normal, it's just, if I was to have an odd toilet, or if I was to have a stomachache and have a bit of a bad stomach, you know, I'll always question. I wouldn't be just like, oh, I've just got a bit of a stomachache. In my mind, I'm like, wow, am I having a flare-up? Is it coming back? You know, there's always that sort of fear. I definitely believe that the mental element of it, regardless of, you know, what you're suffering with, even if it is just somewhat going through a breakup or, you know, losing somebody in your life, there's always that trauma that will sort of trigger different emotions and feelings within your mind. And I think, you know, a large part of it does come with acceptance. And I think I suffered with acceptance. I suffered with understanding why this happened to me. And, you know, I think I was quite naive and ignorant into thinking that, you know, I was going to live forever, or I was always going to remain young and healthy. And I think although these things happen, I think you just never think they're going to happen to you. And, you know, it did happen to me. And, you know, alhamdulillah, like I always say, like, it always could have been a lot worse. I think it's a hard conversation to have with yourself, and, you know, just accepting that certain things happen in your life. I think till now, I think my mental health is in a better place, but I don't think it's amazing. I think one thing I really struggle with is overthinking. I think, you know, I will let a situation sort of manifest in my mind rent-free for so long, and I will just let it build up and build up and build up. I don't want to sit here and pretend I live this, you know, rosemary life. I think that I love being very transparent with you guys, and, you know, I definitely feel as though we as younger people need to check on people more. I think we sort of have this stigma that we're all strong and we're this young generation who's just fit for flight, and, you know, if you're not over a certain age then you can't be suffering with this, and we constantly make other people feel as though, but this person's going through this, therefore you can't be going through this. And I think it's absolute bullshit. I think, you know, what you are going through is something that you are going through. Everybody has different levels as to what they can accept as a human being. It's definitely not a one shoe fits all type situation, especially with mental health. And, you know, I think, like I previously said, especially with trauma, from specifically to what I've been through, I think that it can really shape and change how we think as people. And, you know, I think, you know, even when you say anxiety, people be like, oh, you don't have anxiety, you're just worried. Like, and it's just levels like this, like that can manifest in somebody else's mind, and they can then start to overthink just that one little comment, and, you know, that can stop them from them reaching out in future to you or anyone else, because they feel like they already receive a similar response. So just be careful when you're speaking to people about mental health. Please kind of understand that if you haven't been through something, you are ignorant to that situation, and therefore you cannot give 100% clear, concise advice, especially if it's negative and especially if it is invalidating how somebody is feeling. I think one thing you should do is learn to comfort people without trying to give them an answer. A lot of the time, people are not looking for answers. I was never looking for answers because that answer had to come from within me. I think what a lot of people try to do is they try to fix a situation and they try to look for an answer, and therefore they end up feeling helpless. And I think Cameron is such a clear example of that. I don't need an answer. I just need a cuddle, a bit of comfort, and I just maybe need a bit of attention and, you know, a bit of a conversation. It's not always necessarily I need you to tell me what's going on. I think, you know, my issue was because it was a physical element that was impacting my mental health. Until that situation was fixed, nobody could have told me and said it was going to be okay, it's going to be okay, until I'm out of that situation. Not everything always requires an answer. I think as human beings, it's natural to sort of want to fix people and to give that person an answer. I think, you know, there's a sense of helplessness, and it's not always about trying to be a hero in everybody's book. Sometimes it's just about allowing someone else to see the hero within them. And I think that, again, is what Cameron has really done for me. Rather than trying to now be the hero, he sort of transitioned himself into allowing me to see who I truly am as a person. A lot of us can be very black and white with situations, and it's giving someone else the tools to make themselves better as opposed to trying to fix somebody. Again, it's really changed who I am as a person. It takes a long time to change. I think once you get very used to a routine in your life, I got very used to being at home. I got very used to being a recluse. I was reclusive for almost a year. I didn't go out. I lost a lot of friendships. I think a lot of that was down to me not being the cool girl anymore, I'll be very honest with you. I think I lost a lot of them due to what had happened in my life, and I think the ones that are still around now are the true friends, and the ones that I lost then were the ones who were just in it for a good time. And you really realise when you go through a hardship or something in your life, you do really realise who is next to you on your hospital bed, and, you know, who's just texting you once every week to see if you're all right when you're going through something like that. So I definitely feel like it allowed me to really sieve through my true friendships, and, you know, I'm very grateful for it, because now the friendships that I have with most of my girls and Cameron are even stronger, even better, because I've been through that and I've come out the better side of it. And again, it's not to say this couldn't happen to me again. You know, my illness is not cured, I'm just in remission, so this could potentially happen to me again. And I know I've got such a great set of role models and such a great set of friendships and a great husband around me to know that, you know, I've got such a great network. And I think that is really important in those who can't see a way out and those who can see a way out. And I think for me, a lot of me seeing a way out was through the great people I had around me. And again, even my family, like even having my mum around me, even though my mum is like the biggest warrior in the world, she's a warrior at the same time. And, you know, I feel as though she was so strong for me, and she never made me feel as though I was too big, or, you know, she'd always say, oh no, you still look really nice and all this sort of stuff. And she really tried to uplift my spirits all the time. And, you know, she really pushed me to go out and do things and enjoy myself. So I found it really, really difficult. But at the same time, I think it really is around you who matters. Having great people around you, I can't stress the importance of it, you know, because you want to maintain a positive, healthy well-being. And I think a lot of it really does go down to what you see, hear and taste as well. I think what you're looking at will affect your mental health. What you're listening to will affect your mental health. What you're eating can affect your mental health. There are so many foods that we know release dopamine, which is, you know, a positive effect on your brain. What you see on a daily basis, if you're constantly looking at all of these Instagram models and, you know, constantly comparing yourself to them and wanting a small waist and wanting all these sorts of things, then again, that can affect your mental health. So I definitely think that, you know, if you inspire your outlook, you will absorb an intake. And I truly believe that, you know, I think that as people, we definitely need to remodel and reshape and retrain and unlearn our brains to sort of think the way we think. And it is really hard, you know, the more you tell yourself not to think about something, naturally you think about it more. Also, just another word of advice, because it is something that's happened to me along the way as well, is please don't tell somebody when they tell you how they're feeling not to feel like that. The reason why I say that is because, one, it invalidates how they're feeling, and 2, it makes them not want to speak to you about how they're feeling. I think once you sort of change your language and you look at it as though you're coming from their side, it doesn't feel like a personal attack. I think when you tell somebody you shouldn't feel like that, you're putting your own sort of agenda onto how they're supposed to be feeling, and it's just really, really not nice. And it happened to me so much, and it really did make me feel as though I didn't want to open up to anyone, and I didn't want to tell people how I'm feeling, because they'd automatically say you shouldn't feel like that. And without being a bitch, you don't know how I should be feeling because you're not going through what I'm feeling. So just a little bit of advice, guys, if you are ever handling those sort of conversations with people and you do kind of want to maybe have a little bit of a different perspective. It is a really tricky subject. There are so many different avenues to mental health. It's such a complexity, and again, even how I've touched on mental health might be very different to how somebody else touched on mental health, because it is our own different journeys that shape mental health in itself. And if you do know somebody that is going through something, please reach out. Please don't be in the mindset of, but they haven't hollered at me, so I'm equally as right to say, well, I don't need to holler at them, because you might be okay, whereas they might be going through something that you don't necessarily know about. Make excuses for people, guys. Like, really do try to understand that, especially in the world and the day and age that we are in today, guys. I really don't think we need to be petty, and we need to have that sort of mentality where we're saying, oh, but they haven't hollered at me. When we first went into lockdown, I think for me, I was very, very conscious of my health, and I was very scared about catching the illness. I was high risk, guys, and I was getting letters from the NHS, telling me that I'm high risk. I was really scared that because I have a low immune system, naturally, if I was to catch the illness, something potentially could happen to me, and I was talking to my doctors a lot. They were keeping in check with me regularly, but in that space of time, I didn't speak to a lot of my friends, and that wasn't because I didn't want to speak to my friends. It was because I was very health conscious. I was very mentally conscious of what the world was going into. We were going into a lockdown, and obviously, don't get me wrong, I didn't want to let that manifest and sort of become more than what it was. Cameron really helped me through that and said, what, we're in a pandemic, everyone's sort of going through it together. We stay at home, we take all of the necessary precautions. What comes after that is then what's written. And I think that's kind of the mentality that I've tried to have recently. I take all the necessary precautions and then I just leave the rest to God. During quarantine, if my friends were to have the outlook that because I haven't hollered at them, why are they hollering at me, maybe we wouldn't have spoken, or we would have just fallen out. Whereas a lot of them understood that what, shit, Farah is high risk, what, let's just check on her a little bit more. It wasn't necessarily that I didn't want to check on my friends. I was just trying in that moment in time just to get my mind right, get my health right, and look after myself in that moment in time. What may have been seen as neglectful, my friends kind of understood and was a bit like, what, no, she's going through a hard time. It was, I think everybody was going through a hard time. And on the flip side of that, one of my good friends actually started towards the end of quarantine, when things started to get a bit easier, it started to get a little bit on top for them, and they started to struggle. And a couple of my other friends, I think after the months had gone by, they found it a little bit difficult. Some people's houses are smaller, some people's houses are bigger, some people have siblings. And I just think that a lot of people's mental health relied on going to cafes. A lot of people's mental health relied on going out with their friends or partying on the weekend. A lot of people, have a lot of demons that they definitely do distract with busyness. And I think quarantine was a really hard situation for a lot of people. And obviously that's why suicide was on the rise. And even domestic violence was on the rise, because people were at home a lot. And, we were all put in situations where everything was heightened. A lot of us fear the unknown. This again into affected a lot of people, and people were losing loved ones during this time as well, and not being able to be with them, and people not being able to see their loved ones who they rely on as well for their mental well-being and their mental health. And there were so many different factors to it. So I definitely think that hopefully, not even just this video, but I hope that even just us all going through quarantine together, and I think us all sort of understanding that there are so many different elements to people's lives, I think we definitely need to restructure, the sort of conversations we have. So, the one thing I would say is message your loved ones, check on your loved ones, make sure they're okay. After all of this, I think, we've all learned a pretty harsh lesson that time really is of the essence, and nothing really matters more importantly than your family and your friends and your loved ones. So, yeah. I think that's definitely the message that I've wanted to get across today, and I really hope I have. I hope I haven't offended anyone, and I hope I haven't been insensitive to any situations. If I have, then I am sorry. I was never ever meant to offend anyone. I just basically wanted to speak to you about the mental health side of, you know, how I was feeling throughout my illness, and, you know, how I've sort of tried to channel myself into a more of a different person. And, you know, if you're somebody who hasn't gone through that and you are speaking to somebody who has gone through that, or, you know, maybe your family member or a friend, or, you know, all these sorts of things, just try and be a little bit more understanding. And where you find it difficult to level with a particular emotion because you don't understand it or you're not feeling it, give them the excuse because you are not currently going through that. And I think once you sort of break that barrier down and you don't invalidate a particular emotional feeling from somebody, and you try to just understand how they are feeling, I think the conversation will flow very differently, and you'll see yourself on a much better side of that conversation. Whereas it comes from me having a conversation from A to B, it sort of comes A to B. Does that sort of make sense? So you're kind of standing side by side as opposed to standing one against the other. And I think once you're on the same side and you're in the same boat, it's a whole lot better. But yeah, I hope that, you know, you have taken away some sincere messages from this, and I hope that maybe now you can maybe learn to articulate and word yourself a little bit differently to understand that mental health does come in so many different shapes and sizes, and it's never a one shoe fits all. So guys, that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have got to this part of the video, then I am super appreciative. We are talking about doing a part 3. So me and Cameron were speaking about it yesterday, and we were basically saying that we are thinking of doing a perspective video. So because I've now spoken to you guys about my illness and sort of the mental health aspects of what's come from that, I think maybe it'd be great if we could get Cameron on screen and to speak to him about what it's like living and being a part of somebody else's journey in mental health. And I think that'd be such a great perspective to see, because Cameron is such a great example of somebody who really started off quite hard-headed and black and white, and has really had to change his way of thinking in order to work with me on this journey, because it would never have worked in the beginning. Although he could be very compassionate, I think he does have quite a headstrong personality, and sometimes that's just not the way to approach every situation. And so I think it'd be great if we could get him on camera and talk more about how he's seen things and the way he was feeling and his way of living in order to accommodate me. So let me know guys in the bottom if that's something that you would love to see. But again, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I really hope that I have helped in some way, shape or form. And always feel free to pop me a message, send me whatever you guys want to send me. I'm always happy to talk. But until then guys, take care.